Before we get into today's video, I just wanted to give a big thank you to my Patreon family and personally give a shout out to Lisa, Janine, Vienna, and Rachel. You guys are amazing and I appreciate you guys so much. This video could not happen without them. Today we're going to be talking all about paper, specifically my favorite types of paper to use with alcohol-based markers. All of the papers that I'm mentioning in this video are affordable. I think nearly all of them are acid-free. Most of them are a little bit on the heavier and thicker side, and all of them are great for use with alcohol-based markers such as Copics or even something a little bit on the lower end like Ohuhu. So if you're interested in trying out some new papers, this is a video for you. If you've recently gotten into alcohol-based markers and thought to yourself, these aren't quite what I expected, it could be the type of paper that you're using. Markers are a medium that are meant to be layered and blended, and that requires a paper that can hold up to a lot of layering and building. Not all papers are cut out for it, and not all papers are created equally. In my experience, a lot of papers that market themselves as marker papers are not very compatible with alcohol-based markers. They tend to be on the thinner side, and I find that the ink on a lot of those papers has a hard time absorbing into the paper itself, meaning you're prone to smudging, or your ink can kind of just sit on top of the paper and get like a sticky, shiny finish. It's very odd and personally not my preference. So when it comes to marker papers, I tend to go for the more thicker, heavier, textured papers. Not quite like watercolor paper, but kind of somewhere on the middle of the spectrum between a really heavy-duty, highly textured watercolor paper and like your run-of-the-mill sketchbook paper. We're kind of leaning a little bit more towards the watercolor side with the thickness and a little bit on the texture, but all of these papers are extremely affordable and budget-friendly, more like that typical sketchbook paper side. Editing Amanda here. I just wanted to briefly highlight a point that I hear a lot of people bring up when using thicker papers for their markers. Thicker papers will absorb your marker ink faster, meaning you will burn through your markers a little bit quicker than you would if you were using a thinner paper. However, I think it's well worth the price to pay, considering that it will be easier to blend and layer your markers. Overall, it will be easier to use, and I think you'll like the results better. So I would say invest in a marker brand that you can purchase ink refills like Copic or Blick, and that will make your whole marker journey much more worthwhile. The first paper that I want to talk about is the Georgia-Pacific Premium Cardstock. This is something I discovered a couple of years ago. This is the only paper that does not explicitly state that it is acid-free, so I have to assume that it isn't, which really only comes into play if you're worried about the archival quality of your artwork, meaning I would not recommend selling finished artwork on this paper, but for those of you who are just getting into markers and are worried about messing up, this is an extremely affordable and approachable paper to start with. It's also really good for those of you who are working on really large scale projects, like maybe a comic book, and you need a lot of paper at your disposal. This pack of 150 sheets retails for less than $6, and the price per sheet works out to about 4 cents. It's 110 pound paper or 199 GSM, so it is going to be really nice and heavy weight. It also gives a brightness indicator, which I think none of the other papers do. This is more of a measurement for papers used for printing, but it is 92 brightness. I have printed on this paper and I do really like it as well, but I originally purchased it for use with markers and have loved it for years. The biggest limitation is that I'm pretty sure this is the only size it comes in, so you're very limited to 8.5 by 11 inch illustrations. You're not really able to work bigger. You are able to trim down the paper to smaller sizes, but I know for a lot of artists out there, they want a size a little bit bigger than this. So you're not going to find that, but if you're looking for something affordable and accessible, I find this at my local Walmart and highly recommend it. Sticking with the cardstock theme, I want to give a shout out to the Recollections brand cardstock. You can find this at Michael's. This is their 4.5 by 6.5 inch paper. This also comes in lots of other sizes and other colors. I actually have the cream finish cardstock as well, which is really beautiful. This cardstock is a little bit more lightweight, coming in at 65 pounds and 176 GSM, but it is still really nice. What you'll notice is that the lighter weight papers will just tend to bleed more, so you'll want to put a protective layer between your desk and the paper when you're using this, especially if you're using heavy blending. Again, this paper is acid free and you get 100 sheets in here, which is pretty great. This pack retails for around $6 and the price per sheet works out to about 6 cents each. So again, it's super budget friendly, and like I mentioned, this comes in lots of other sizes and colors. So if you want to explore using markers on toned paper, this is the brand to experiment with. It's also a paper that I've printed with and makes for really beautiful prints. So I think in general, the message here is that cardstock papers are really great starting points for artists because they can be used for illustrations and for printing, tend to be budget friendly, and are just incredibly versatile to have around. Any uncoated cardstock is going to be a really great thing to try out. Next is the bpaper Artist Marker Pad. This is one of the few papers that is actually marketed for use with markers that I actually really enjoy. This is the 8.5 by 11 inch pad. It comes with 30 sheets and retails for about 10 bucks. So each sheet retails for about 30 cents, which again is super reasonable. It's 110 pound paper, but you'll find that it is a little bit more wobbly than something like the cardstock, which is also 110 pounds. It's 180 GSM and again is acid free. This does claim to be from their professional series, so I'm not sure if they offer lower quality, lower cost versions of this marker paper, because this is actually the only paper I've tried from bpaper, and I've really enjoyed it. I do highly recommend it. Just to show you the difference between the weights of the two papers, this is the cardstock. It's a little bit heavier and really has no problem standing up on its own. The bpaper, on the other hand, tends to just kind of not be as stiff, but they're both really great for blending, and I find that they're pretty much comparable. So if you find that you like the Georgia Pacific cardstock but you're wanting something that's acid free, B marker paper is going to be a really nice upgrade for you. And to my knowledge, they also have some other sizes available as well, so there's a good chance you'll be able to find something a little bit bigger than this size and a little bit smaller than this size if that's your preference. Next, I'm going to talk about a couple of Strathmore papers. This is the 300 series Bristol, and this is the paper that I've been using since day one when I bought markers. I've gone through so many pads of this paper and I honestly love it. The biggest advantage to this paper in particular, the 300 series Bristol with the yellow cover, is that it comes in such a wide variety of sizes. You can get this in artist trading card sizes all the way up to like 19 by 24 inch pads. It's ridiculous, but it's such good quality at such a good price. I have the 9 by 12 inch pad here. It comes with 20 sheets and retails for about $9.50 for this pad, about 47 cents per sheet. It's a super good value, and you can find this everywhere. I found it at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, and even Walmart. I will have links to all of these papers where you can purchase them down below on Amazon, but just to give you a heads up, those are affiliate links, so if you're not comfortable with that, just know that you can find a lot of these papers in your local stores. Again, this paper is acid free, it is heavyweight, and honestly, I think this is a paper that you're not going to be just limited to markers, but you can actually even explore some mixed media stuff on this. Even a little bit of wet media performs really well on the Bristol board. And if I didn't mention, the Bristol 300 series is 100 pounds and 270 GSM, so pretty thick stuff. Next, I absolutely could not film this video without mentioning the Strathmore 400 series mixed media paper. This is the 6 by 8 inch size. It comes with 15 sheets and retails for like $5 on Amazon, which works out to like 33 cents per sheet, which is such a good deal. This is 140 pound paper or 300 GSM, definitely the heaviest weight paper that I'm talking about in this video, but I have loved and used this paper for years. I've gone through many pads of this as well, and I find that it's just the most versatile and durable paper to use with markers. If I'm doing an illustration that requires a lot of blending, maybe even some techniques using the colorless blender or dropping the ink refills directly onto the paper, I will use this because I know without a doubt this will hold up. In fact, most of the time I don't even worry about putting a protective layer between this paper and my desk because I'm pretty sure it's not going to bleed through, which says a lot about the strength of this paper. It does come in a few other sizes, but this is the one I tend to go for the most just because when I am doing a lot of blending, I tend to work a little bit smaller just to save the ink, but this is a super affordable paper and it's a really nice quality. So I think if you haven't checked out Strathmore's papers, they offer a lot of really good ones, and this is one of my favorites. Next, we're going to talk about a paper that I definitely need to repurchase soon, seeing as there's actually only 2 sheets left in this pad. This is the Kansan XL recycled Bristol board. It's very, very similar to the Strathmore Bristol. You'll find that they perform more or less the same way. This one is 96 pounds and 260 GSM as opposed to 100 pounds and 270 GSM with the Strathmore, but at that point you're really splitting hairs. I found this a couple of years ago at Hobby Lobby, and I have to say it's not a paper that can be easily found in stores. I rarely see this at my local art stores, but I did find it online. This is the 9 by 12 inch size. You get 25 sheets and it retails for about 10 bucks. So you're paying more or less 40 cents a sheet, which is pretty reasonable still. When I bought this at Hobby Lobby, it looks like it only cost me 8 bucks. So there's a good chance you can find this even cheaper. And if you're going to Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you can always use a 40% off coupon. And I think the biggest plus about this is that it is recycled, so it is perhaps even better for the environment. I know they do offer a few other sizes, but it is not as big of a range as the Strathmore Bristol board. This comes in 9 by 12 like I have, and also 14 by 17, which is kind of an interesting size. But I do recommend this. I think it's a really, really nice paper and makes me a little bit interested into checking out more of the Kansan Bristol papers because I really enjoyed working with this. Clearly, because it's almost gone. And lastly, I wanted to talk about a paper that I'm sure we've all heard about, the Crescent Render No Show Through paper. This is a pretty revolutionary paper right here. It is truly 100% bleed proof, meaning you can use both sides of the paper doing full marker illustrations on both sides and it won't bleed through. So really, you're getting a pretty good bang for your buck with this one. And depending on how you break down the price, it is either the most expensive or least expensive per sheet. Let me explain. I have here the 9 by 12 inch pad. It retails for $12.99, breaking down to 54 cents per sheet. But considering that you can use both sides of the sheets, the cost per page is 27 cents, which means it's actually pretty reasonable. It does make things a little bit tricky if you intend to sell these illustrations because you really end up only using one side or selling 2 illustrations on one sheet. So that can get a little bit weird and funky, but I do really like this paper. My biggest qualm with it is that because the ink absorbs differently into the paper, instead of absorbing through, it kind of feathers out onto the surface, making it a little bit hard to get clean lines. So that is really the only drawback with this. Other than that, it comes in a lot of really great sizes, and I think it's a really beautiful paper. It's almost more of a light gray tone. It's going to be hard to tell on camera, but it's not quite a full bright white, and it's almost a little bit grayed out. It does have a very nice smooth texture, and it's a little bit on the thin side as well, but again, it is completely bleed proof, and I can attest to that because I've used this paper quite a lot for swatching markers and doing rough concept designs. Again, I don't really reach for it for full illustrations because I do find that it feathers. I also don't agree with their claim that it's good for use with all media because I think I've dabbled in watercolor on this paper and it was not a good experience. That fact that it doesn't bleed through and absorb into the paper makes it kind of weird, so I would stick to using markers with this because that I think is really what it's meant for. And that's it. Those are all of my favorite marker papers. I'm curious if you've tried any of these papers or if you have other recommendations for me. Leave them in the comments down below. I'm sure me and many other people would love to find out more papers out there. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. It helps me out and it just lets me know that you guys want to see more of this type of content. That's all I have for you today. I appreciate you guys watching and I will see you on the internet.